Yeah. You know how like Tim on his podcast, he always is like, I'm super caffeinated right now. I feel like that's like would be such a move just because you bring so much like enthusiasm and like energy to the podcast. Would be dope.
Yeah, but it would like the time that we record, it would totally mess up our sleep. Like,
Yeah, yeah. We'd be like dumb tired.
I'd be with
But
it
I
though.
feel
We should
like
try it.
yeah, if we tried it, I feel like it's 6. We do like an episode and then like while we're still up at like 4 in the morning, have like one of those like late night like beach conversations would be fire.
I think that's how we break through. Have those late night convos.
Yeah.
I think
Sound of the water in the background.
as the podcast evolves, definitely like if we travel somewhere together, like take the podcast on the road and just do them at odd hours, like whatever. Yo, we just went to some show. Yo, we just ate at this dope restaurant. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Just taking that on the road, it'll be good.
Fact. Um, I'm definitely down.
All right, word. So I think we should
Cool.
start with some introductions because some people gave us that feedback. So you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Marco. I um, live in New York City, and Tamara and I have been friends for 7 years now, something like that. Or no, 4. Yeah, technically 7 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm a software engineer, and yeah, just looking to keep learning and figure things out.
Facts. Um, I'm Temur. Marco and I have been boys, yeah, for like 7 years. This is the Blubhaus podcast. Catch us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Episode 2 of probably many, many more.
Facts.
We're excited to be doing this. I'm in Miami right now. Marco's in New York. We're doing this over Google Meets, and yeah, let's hop into it. You wanted to start off talking briefly about the Russia situation.
Yeah, yeah. Just on a macro level, it's just been a really sad day, and our hearts are with the people of Ukraine. And neither of us know that much, so we're not going to really be commenting on it. 'Cause we don't really have much value to bring, but we're like closely reading and following what is going on, and yeah, we just hope for the best and hope things will work out.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Obviously, to sort of complement what you're saying, neither of us really have any expertise or authority to comment on the specifics of the situation, but war always sucks, and our hearts are going out to all the people that are suffering in Ukraine right now. So we offer them our prayers and just hope for things to get better as quickly as they can.
Bye. Cool. Um, yeah. So do you want to? We have some topics listed. Do you want to? You could pick what you want to chop it up about first.
Yeah, I'm curious why you wrote the Olympics, like why they're so underrated, and I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I feel like I was in a bar with a few friends and we're talking, and somehow the Olympics came up, and I was like, "Wait, what?" And they're like, "Yeah, like the Olympics are starting today." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And like someone else at the table too was like, "Yeah, what are you talking about?" And I feel like it was just so undermarketed, and like I
Hmm.
knew the Olympics were this year, but like I feel like it just wasn't a big thing, and a lot of people weren't talking about it. And as time went on, I felt like it gained a little more traction, but I felt it was the same. So I Googled, Google has like where you can search trends. So they won't give you like the exact numbers of like what people are searching for, but you can just see the relative scale.
Hmm.
Um, and if you look on the graph, like even last year's Olympics, which I think was the lowest recorded Olympics so far, it showed that we were at like 50% of searches compared to that. So I don't know. It just was super interesting, and I feel like yeah, I don't know. And also another interesting thing to see was in the Summer Olympics, the U.S. and China were like battling for top seed, who had the most gold medals. And this Olympics, it was like some Nordic country won, but um, yeah, we were below China in gold medal count, but not total medal count, and we were in like 4th place, I think,
Mm.
um, which is interesting. And may have larger implications. But yeah,
Yeah,
what are your
like potentially a
thoughts on that?
signal of the changing of the dominant world order. My girlfriend and I have some friends who were like watching the Olympics kind of closely, and I just remember the first time they mentioned like, oh, like we're watching the opening ceremony. We're like, what? What's going? Like the Olympics are happening. I wonder how much
Yeah,
of it has to do with the fact like we don't own like cable or like we don't watch TV really. And it's like if we use a TV, it's for like streaming services. Um,
sure.
but I don't know. Yeah, it just seemed like there wasn't a lot of hype about it. One thing I did hear. Did you hear about this? There was a Chinese American. I think she's a skier, but I could be wrong. This woman Eileen Gu, I think is her name, and she basically, I think, was born in China, lived there till she was like just for a few years, and then like moved to America and like grew up in America for like most of her life, and
Mhm.
renounced her American citizenship to like compete for China.
Wow.
And it was like kind of I don't know if it was controversial or not, but I heard about it on Flagrant, where Schultz was basically like she must have been paid a boatload and like kind of
Did she
he thinks
secure a medal?
I don't know, man. Honestly,
Hmm.
this is how unaware I am of the Olympics. Like, I mean, Winter
Yeah.
Olympics are always kind of like I'm not paying attention, but this was like even more so. I just remember like there was a meme about like some stadium they built in China and like how in the background it was just like mad industrial and ugly.
Yeah, it looked
Um,
like a Call of Duty map.
that us, yeah. It
yeah,
really, that's a good comparison. It looked like I think it was called Block or something, Modern Warfare 2 map.
yeah, yeah,
It really did look like a Modern Warfare 2 map.
yeah. It was crazy too to see. I feel like right, like when Phelps was in the Olympics, like everyone watched Phelps. In the Winter Olympics, everyone like loves Sean White. He didn't secure a single medal. Like, and obviously, I know it's like
Sean White
competitive. He's at
didn't?
like no, he didn't get a single medal, and like yeah, I don't know. It's pretty nuts. I mean, he's dating like Nina Dobrev now, and like I mean, he's like a celebrity, owns like
He's
a bunch
kind of
of brands,
Hollywood
but like
now.
it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't care. Like he's
Hmm.
already secured the bag. Like, um,
Yeah. I wonder if like the Olympics just hasn't like caught on to changing their like I didn't even see anything on like social media really. Like
that's what I'm
about
saying. It
like
was quiet.
promotion for it. Like Instagram, I feel like you would have seen ads or like stories or something, but I just saw nothing. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't
I
name
wonder if
one American like competitor and maybe that's just me. Maybe a lot of people can, but
no, I'm in the same, and I feel like usually it's like a big thing. I
mhm.
wonder if in like what was it, the top country was like Denmark or Norway or something like that. I wonder if there it's like the biggest thing because like they're crushing it, like and probably proportionate. Like the amount of medals they get for population size is probably like ridiculous.
Mhm. Probably, yeah. Did Anton, sorry, on a different note, did Anton reply to your message?
Not yet. I'm
Yeah, I wonder
curious.
what
I
he
mean,
thinks.
they're like pretty close range. I mean, geographically not like geographically close, but there's like a body of water between them. Um,
Yeah.
but
Were you like
the
looking at your
last thing,
Twitter a bunch last night and just like refreshing and refreshing?
I've been on Twitter on that like Naval
Yeah, the Naval
like
list.
stream basically, yeah, list
Yeah.
like all day yesterday and today, and it's just been like I saw a good tweet that was interesting. It was just like, can you imagine like or just like how different times are now where you can get like literally like minute by minute play of like what's happening versus like the newspaper where it was like once a day or even TV
Hmm.
where it was like every, handful of hours. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I would refresh the list and it would be like, 13 seconds ago, bombs going off in Kiev or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
There were things like it'd be like one plane has been shot down here. I was like, literally everything is being recorded, which is nuts.
yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely. I wonder how it'll actually affect like warfare. Maybe not at all. Maybe it raises like global awareness. Who knows?
Yeah, I think
Maybe it's like kind of nothing. I don't know.
I found myself to be like a lot more feeling like more like anxious or like down today.
Hmm.
I was like, I feel like if I'm consuming nothing but like more stories, like I feel like, yeah, I mean, I
Hmm.
assume that's related, but
Something that
um,
was going through my mind is like I think I've seen this happen a couple times. Do you remember like the first week of 2020 when like Trump like drone struck, drone struck,
Tehran.
yeah, Tehran airport, and like for like 2 days, Twitter was just like, "Oh, World War III, World War III," and then like it didn't really nothing materialized past that, or at least it seemed like. I wonder, like when I'm reading all these headlines and like people like Naval, for example, said like this is the end of Pax Americana.
Mhm.
Um, I wonder how much is like just immediate reaction. I mean, separate from like, yeah, it's horrible, but like, what are like, how well are people's like worst case scenario predictions going to map to what actually happens? Like some people like, oh, World War III. I mean, who knows? It's just like
Yeah,
so it's developing.
I think there's so many factors, and like I don't know. Remember that like the weight but wide chart where it's like all the graphs leading to now, and
Hmm.
it's like that's that one path, and from here there's so many paths. Like I there's just too many variables, and like
Hmm.
we're not the people to like, or
Facts.
anyone really has knows what's going to
Hmm.
happen. But uh, it feels like events that happen now like seem to happen quicker and like more widespread than they did in the past. But
I
yeah,
saw a meme that I sent to my sister, just kind of funny. It was like, why does it seem like how come lifetime events are happening like every other week?
literally,
And it kind of just seems like that, right? Like we've had a crazy run of like 2 years, and it doesn't seem like. I mean, COVID kind of seems over. I don't know if that's irresponsible to say, but
yeah.
it kind of seems over, at least in the states right now. But yeah, like now this is getting launched.
It's like a handoff.
So
It was like as
yeah,
soon as this was done, it was like, oh, bet
yeah.
like
And do you
it's
remember for a
crazy.
while people thought like there was going to be a big reveal from the CIA about aliens? For like aliens were getting kind of hype like what, like early summer 2021 maybe?
I thought there was like footage released or something, and it
Yeah,
kind of like got swept under the rug because there was like 8 million
so
other
much
things.
shit
But
going on, yeah. And then did you see like last week somebody like closely linked to Epstein also commit suicide in his jail cell?
it's crazy.
Like no, like
Yeah,
that story kind of just got shut down also like once he died.
it's
When
just
I
like a
was
flood. Like things just get like watered down and flooded out now instead of
mhm.
like covered up in other ways. Like,
When I was a kid and I like used to think about like if there's a life after death or heaven or whatever, I used to like really hope there was a heaven just so like I can get answers for these conspiracies and questions. Um, I still kind of hope that there will be some way to find out what the truth is behind all of these things.
uh,
Um, yeah, I wonder if the Epstein stuff will ever come out. I'm sure there are people working on and pursuing that in private and see if it'll ever like
on both
materialize
ends.
to everything. Yeah, on both ends for sure.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of the death thing, it just reminded me. I'm reading a really short book called Some, and it's like stories of the afterlife or
40
something like
stories
that.
from Eagleman,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
something like that. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
actually like,
it's kind of
have you
funny.
read it or?
Yeah, I read like the first 25% of it and just put it down,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I thought it was really cool.
I feel like it was someone like it reminded me of someone just like smoking a joint and then just like writing, a tiny book. Like
Hmm.
it was like cool thought experiments, but some of them were pretty funny. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was talking about this earlier. I just went on a walk with my girlfriend, and I was saying also another thing that I thought about as a kid and still kind of think about like as a fantasy. What if on our deathbed we get the option to do a redo and take all the knowledge that we gained in life and like start from, same certain birth circumstances, all that stuff. Um, and then like as we, or maybe you start at a teenager. I don't really know because it'd be weird to be a baby and like have the wisdom of a 97-year
Baby
old
Tamor like doing calculus like
that
later.
um like that would be. I wonder if you get bored because you would just do everything like not everything perfectly, but in terms of invest. Can you imagine just investing in Bitcoin like when you were
Oh, like you're
15?
saying you wouldn't like re-enter the exact moment like 50 years younger. You would like go back 50 years in time, let's say.
You would literally like your life would start again, the exact same birth circumstances, but you just knew everything you knew.
I feel like that would suck. Like,
Yeah, it would
I
suck,
mean, I'm
but it'd
sure
also
certain
be
parts would be
cool.
cool and it'd be OP. Like, I mean,
So we
but I
watched
think the
this. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I think the if the other version of like you have, let's say, it or like mid-20s intelligence and you wind it back like 15 years, that I think would be pretty interesting. And like, I don't know. I mean, we still have such an abundance of time, so I feel like not that much of a difference, but it obviously would have, I don't know, it would lead to drastically different outcomes. Like,
Mhm. We watched this movie like 2 weeks ago. It's a Tom Cruise movie called Edge of Tomorrow. Have you seen it or heard of
no,
it? Without ruining anything, basically, he like is in a war, and every time he dies, he wakes up at the beginning of that day, right?
gotcha. So it's like that
So
other, what's that?
it's like Palm Springs, kind of like
Palm
Palm
Spring.
Springs,
Yeah.
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 And we were sort of having this talk, my girlfriend and I, like how many repeat days would you have to live until you really like exhausted the possibilities of what you could do, and then would want to go back to regular life? Like if I told you, Marco, like you can do the Palm Springs experiment where you can have like
Mhm.
Groundhog Day, like wake up every day the same day, but when you want to get out of it, you can get out of it. How far would you push? Like how far would you push it? Like you could never die
Is
in this context. Like if you died, you would like just wake up at the beginning of the day, and then
gotcha. Is it,
also like when you go to
go ahead.
sleep, you just wake up. Like whenever you go to sleep, you
Gotcha.
just wake up at that like beginning of that day again.
Okay. Would would it be like Palm Springs example? You can like carry like memory from each day or
Yeah,
no?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And you also, is it like you wake up in the same bed, same location?
Yeah, like same beginning circumstances.
Okay.
Like think of
And
it like initial state. Initial state is like the
sure.
same.
Can you pick your initial, like, could I plan this day out? Be like, oh, like I want to go like I'll fly to like Jamaica and then like live my everyday there versus like New York.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I think, I don't know. I feel like probably like a few decades, I feel like.
Yeah, like a really long time.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, even New York, like I feel like you could eat at the same restaurant. Like, I mean, you could eat at a different restaurant every day and then like, I don't know,
Wake up with
really
the
enjoy
same
it. And
bank
your bank
account.
account.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just go get like bad steak every day.
So yeah, probably start with like easy stuff, like going to eat at all the great places. But I'm wondering when we start to push the boundary. Like, let me see if I can convince this money to like this person rather to give me all their money. Like, I'm thinking like how long would it take? Like, how many different skills could you master, and like how would that? And how good could you get at like social sort of honestly manipulation or like engineering with people when you can literally like try the same thing every single day?
1,000 times. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you could just like try, fails, like,
Yeah. Wake up the next day,
you know,
try it again.
hit the quick restart. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And there's like no
Yeah, I think,
consequences.
yeah, I think could definitely be a movie, even though a version of
It
it
has,
is
yeah.
already a movie.
I mean, a
But I
few,
think
yeah.
like turning it more into like, I don't know, playing on like greed and stuff like that, like probably could turn into like an interesting movie.
I feel
Um,
like in the future that also could be like a video game, like a VR sort of like next level Grand Theft Auto or like just life simulation.
I feel like many people's lives when they're like on autopilot, it's not that different, honestly. Like besides the aging factor, like people do have a pretty similar routine and stuff. Like,
Yeah, for sure. They're
I mean,
doing the
obviously with
same
a lot
thing
of
day
caffeine,
after day, but there's a lot of like consequences, you know? Like imagine you could
for
just
sure.
like go whatever the most exclusive restaurant is in New York that would like not accept you. Like how many different ways could I try to get a table that night before I succeeded getting a table, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be, yeah.
So
But I
tell me.
definitely think the location you start would be drastically different. Like if you're in like Antarctica, like
No,
bro,
that'd be
I'd be like,
buns. It'd be horrible. Like I'd do
I'd be like,
less
all right,
than one
next day
day.
we're out,
Like no, yeah.
literally.
But I'd be like New
Yeah,
York
you
would
gotta
be
jump
insane.
into. You have an ultimate ice plunge though.
Yeah, but I mean like it's just as cold. It's like probably not even as
I
cold as
know.
it is in my apartment, right? Because it's like above
Yeah,
freezing. So, but
yeah,
yeah, the outside air when you're trying to warm up, brolic.
probably. I
But I
sent you
was
that video,
reading.
right? That
Yeah, I didn't watch it yet though. The Jake Paul, sorry, Logan Paul clip.
yeah. But even the other one, they're in like Siberia or something, and
Oh,
they
that
like
one
dig
was
out like a
crazy.
lake. Yeah,
That one
and I'm
was,
like,
yo. I was thinking about that
it's
the
kind
other
of
day.
sick.
Like people live their whole lives there,
Yeah, I know.
like
Like,
birth to
move.
death.
It's wild.
Crazy. Marco's talking about. He sent me this video in like this small village in Siberia where they sort of showed like multiple days in the life of like different people, and one of the guys every day like it's brick, and he just
Yeah, I think it was like negative 30 or it was like negative
yeah.
30 plus or minus 10 degrees. And like people can't even like shut their cars off because they like the engine just freezes. And this
Hmm.
guy, yeah, digs out part of a lake that he like does every day and just plunges in it.
Hmm.
It's different.
Crazy. Yeah. It just blows my mind. Like, how does someone live there their whole life?
I feel like people probably feel that about like
New York.
so many different places too. Even New York,
Facts.
yeah,
Yeah.
like even like good places. Like I feel like if that person were to come to New York, it would just be like incomprehensible, like
Yeah.
vice versa.
Did you did you get it a lot like when you first went to college? Oh my god, you grew up in New York? Like what was that like?
Yeah, certain people, but I also feel like our school was like people were fairly well traveled, well off.
Hmm.
Like so people had been to like comparable cities.
Hmm.
I found myself like the biggest thing I remember like for like it was probably like 2 months at school. Like this is like somewhat off topic, but I just remember like looking out the window and like seeing the mountains, and I was just like, it was one of those things where you're just like, yo, I'm fully in a simulation right now. Like,
You felt
yeah,
like where am I?
I was just like, yo, the simulation is running like some powerful ass GPU to run like to make this look that pretty. Like, I don't know,
Yeah. Santa Clara was like a resort. It wasn't like
really well.
it was too pretty.
Facts.
I remember the main thing like if I think back to
You
when
know
I first got to California, I just remember thinking like, yo, why is everyone like so nice? Like it felt wrong. Because growing up in New
facts.
York, like people are not nice, and like you kind of your currency is like how well you can navigate that, and then like use humor to like deflect onto other people, and it's like growing up in New York, like the like humor is so aggressive, so
Facts.
aggressive. And I remember coming to California and trying to be that person. People would be like, dude, what's up with you? Like, why are you such a dick? And I'm like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? Like, I'm a nice person. Like, this is just making jokes. But yeah,
Yeah.
the like this, I think it's like, it's good to like seek exposure to like different cultures. And we talked about this last episode, but like, people like there are different social rules in different places, and I think it's like one of the things about maybe like refined adulthood is like learning how to modulate your communication to like the sort of rules that
Or in
the
place in
other
that culture.
yeah, the rules that are in place like in an interaction. I
I
think this
it
talks
is.
about, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's interesting. Like when two sides meet. I forget. There's some book I was reading that was talking about like I forget what culture it is, but like yeah, I mean it's anything from like shaking hands to anything like that. Like in one culture, it's like the norm of saying hi, and the other it's like super disrespectful, and like
Dude.
a smaller version of that happens when we go to like California
Mhm.
or whatever, like different places.
There's like a someone made a mashup of Khabib, like because he's from Dagestan. You know what I'm about to say? He's from
No,
Dagestan, and it's like very like religious culture there, like very devout Muslim culture there, and like he won't even like shake women's hands because it's like seen as like disrespectful to a woman to shake her hand. So like there's someone made a mashup where like female reporters are going up to Khabib like trying to shake his hand, and he just goes like this, like sorry I can't shake your hand, and then he like says something in their ear, which is probably like, oh, in my culture like we don't do this.
uh,
Um, but it's pretty hilarious, the clip,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
I'm
like
sure
a
chopped up.
mashup. But to go back for a second, I think what we were just talking about, like like matching communication based on like the social standard. I think that ties
Mhm.
into your point about like your reputation is more important now than ever. And like the tagline is like kindness allows you to scale as a human. You want to riff on that for a second?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I feel like now in the past, right, if you lived in a small community, right, your like reputation was like extremely important, right? You probably only like transacted or interacted with like a handful of people. So in that sense, it was like extremely important. But if you ever left those, the small city, like you basically were starting fresh again. Whereas now, right, like by and large, like if one of us were to go to another city within like, or let's say we went to like grad school or something like that, like within a minute, someone could know exactly like look up our LinkedIn, look up our Instagram, and have a sense of like what's our rep, like
Mm-hmm.
what's job background, all these things, and like I feel like it's only going to get more important. Like our I don't know. I feel like reps are going to be just so much more important, and it's the amount of mutual connections. Like what's the Kevin Bacon thing? Like 6 connections from Kevin Bacon. Like I feel like everyone's connection count to other people has just been like dropping more and more
Mm-hmm.
as like people socialize more digitally and travel more. um yeah, and I just think like being a good person like just allows you to scale well. Like you can go to a new place and you can have your reputation like lead the way for you, and it's just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think just better for you, better for everyone else, and it's just like
Yeah.
kind of hack. So yeah.
I was I was thinking about something kind of similar, and we texted about this kind of on the point of scale. I think a lot of times I've told you that I'm partially envious of comedians uh, because of the freedom with which they speak online. And I think what podcasts and social media in general has done is it kind of confuses this scale property where on the one hand we're like to I mean everyone to a different extent, but showing our sort of close scale personality to the world, but our
Mhm.
actions will not be judged as if that person is your friend, you know? So to elaborate on that a little more, like let's say one of us said something like that could be racy out of context,
Mhm.
but if we're having a conversation just one on one in your apartment or my apartment, like it would like sort of the context would be well understood, and that's because sort of the one to one relationship, the context of our friendship, the scale of our friendship, we understand each other. The context would be easily understood. Oftentimes with podcasts, when and we see this all the time, like someone gets canceled, something gets taken out of context. I think of this as and let it, all of the egregiously wrong shit aside, just sort of the things that like applying context could sort of
Not be bad. Yeah.
transform the situation. A lot of the times we are it's just like a scale confusion. It's like someone said something in a context where they were talking to someone one on one, and in the public people are reacting to it as if this person said this thing or did this thing to
It's like
everyone.
endorsing it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that is just the world we live in now, and it's to your point about like reputation. Like everything we say or do on the internet persists like to a certain extent. I mean, you could delete your Facebook, but persists to a certain extent, and like it's important, I think, to know that. You know.
Sure, sure. And like you said too, I think like the let's say a tweet or whatever, like that will persist, but the context or like the greater like understanding of the environment at the time like does not persist, or it doesn't isn't
Hmm.
communicated as easily. So like things are taken out of context. Like I mean, even people like read old Facebook posts and different things and like, oh my god, I'm so embarrassed. But like at the time, like no one knew. Like I don't know, like so many things at the time were like okay, and like
Hmm.
yeah, like people need to like accept like, okay, like looking back, yeah, we made mistakes and we're learning from them and we're like getting better. And I'm not like endorsing that or like not saying that people did bad things at certain periods in time, but yeah, I totally agree that like there is context and comments that yeah get taken the wrong way,
Mm-hmm.
like exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
um
if you think of scale like concentric circles, and in the like the smallest circle would be like your closest friends, family. I think context is lost at every sort of scale transformation up,
mhm.
right? So when you go from your family and close friends to maybe like tier 2 friends and relationships to work friends to, you know, your boss at work to the greater community, like all these different scale transformations, context is lost. And I think we anyone who is sort of just living like in a digital world has to understand that certain things persist, and if they come out, sort of you're going to be judged at the scale you're at. So even though what you're
Right,
saying is applying to, you know,
the
like a
local community
personal,
or something like that.
yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, there was actually this weekend a bad incident where like a comment was made and it was like in our friend group, like not that it's acceptable, it just was like not ideal, but it was overheard by a larger group. And like,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it was 100% the situation of like something on like a small community was heard by a larger
Hmm.
community, and like the rules of that smaller community weren't like known.
Hmm.
Not that it made it right, but yeah, um, definitely.
So
Um,
question about that. Do you, not about the specific situation, just like the thinking behind it in general, what do you think is the appropriate way to approach these? Like, sh- I think oftentimes people, when things are leaked, or you know, the situation with your friend group, um, if someone says something in a context or behaves in a certain way in a context that all of the members of that sort of context or that group like agree implicitly or explicitly, like this kind of behavior, this kind of language is okay. Um, how if that, like something they said that is okay within the rules of that group, would come out and not be okay? How do you think? Because this is going to just continue to happen and happen, right? So, what do you think is a good way to think about that, to react to that, also to sort of establish like how do you think about what is okay and what's not okay within like a small friend group versus like at large, you know?
like, how do you determine what that is?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, for example, like you and I can say stuff to each other we wouldn't say to our boss, right? That's just like kind of
Sure.
tacitly understood, or implicitly understood, rather. The point I'm trying to get at is I think like we don't do like anyone justice when we react to what they say, um, like outside of the like context, and when we don't know like the context in which we said
The
it
context.
or they said
Yeah,
it
yeah.
rather.
I find that like this is I found to be true for many things. Like people learn how to treat you or learn what to say based on like what you accept or like what you will tolerate, right? And like I
Hmm.
think in a friend group, like if you say something that's like, you know, an off remark or something, like and there is that communication channel, like people be like, okay, like that wasn't cool. And it's like totally it's like, yo, that was my bad. Like I didn't know that was the case. And it's officially like a law like a rule has been like set from there. And it's
Hmm.
not this formal process. My one of my friends was actually telling me about how like dogs have a similar system as well. Like they learn how like hard to bite when they're playing from like interacting with other dogs. So um, the dog will bite another dog, and like if the dog like squeals, it's like oh shit, like I bit too hard. And my boss's dog didn't have not my boss, my friend's dog didn't have enough uh, like socializing because it was like they adopted the dog, and what happened was like they would actually like let the dog bite their hand, and then like if it was too hard, they would like fake yelp, and the dog like immediately like would get like apologetic, and like it learned how hard to bite. So I think in the same sense, like to tie it all back, like humans learn what is okay from that, but once again, it doesn't translate
Mhm.
across different scales, and I think people fall to the lowest common denominator of like what is acceptable at the largest scale down to
Mhm.
like they'll apply that to their like local you know
Yeah.
squad. So,
Yeah, that's definitely true. Do you remember when this is kind of separate, but do you remember when Tim Ferriss was like he had just gotten his dog and was talking a lot about like training the dog? I remember something funny he said is like everyone before they have kids should definitely like train a dog. And have you ever had a dog? Like growing
no,
up,
no,
did you have a
I
dog?
would no. I very much wanted one though.
Do you think if you
Sister
get a
was allergic.
dog like as an adult, you're gonna go super hardcore with the training personally, or would you like use a training like service?
I don't know. I think I'd want a well trained dog. Like I wouldn't want the dog to be like like I would just I would like to be able to like walk with the dog like without a leash and it be chill and like not I don't know like to be a friendly dog, but I wouldn't like
Mm,
I'm not going to train it to do like mad specific things or I don't know.
backflips
What
and
about you?
shit.
Have you trained a dog? Had a dog? Like what would be
Nah,
your
never
style?
had a never had a dog, never had a cat. I think I would want to go deep on the training, but I also feel like I would lose sort of enthusiasm pretty quickly. Um,
The dog will have to give you a treat then.
thanks. I don't know. I just remember
um,
like Tim talking about like using a clicker, like reading that book, "Don't Shoot the Dog," and like going super hard with um, into the like literature of animal training and behavior modification and stuff.
sure. It's human training 101.
Yeah.
Um, I really wanted to talk about. I know we were texting about this, and I really wanted to hear your thoughts on. Yeah, your thoughts on this. The importance of not knowing enough. Yeah, if you could just expand on that. I'm curious.
So I remember back in 2015 when I was living abroad in New Zealand, I had that's when I first heard about Ray Dalio. And before Principles was like a published book, he had a PDF on his website.
Can you give context? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Ray Dalio is the founder and former CEO, but current still CIO of Bridgewater Associates, which is, I believe, the largest hedge fund in the world as measured by total assets under management. And when Bridgewater did very well in the 2008 2009 subprime mortgage crisis, and they actually predicted it, profited a bunch, made some great investments, and Ray Dalio started to get a lot of like media attention. And there was this New Yorker piece done on him, and they sort of commented on how strange or sort of unconventional the culture at Bridgewater is. And just because he didn't want to continue to sort of like get heat from the media, like people were saying like Ray Dalio is a cult leader, like kind of all these weird sort of accusations and descriptions of Bridgewater. He published like just on his website the core document which defined Bridgewater's culture as a PDF, like free to download, and he just called it Principles. It was basically part description of his. It was like his description of how he thinks about defining culture, how he thinks about life, his guiding life philosophies, and kind of the core philosophy that everything stems from. Um, whether it comes to like making his personal decisions, his investment decisions, his sort of corporate culture management decisions, was his sort of basic worldview, which is that um, everything every good outcome happens because the actions taken are in harmony with the rules of reality, like the laws of reality. And he says like it's beneficial for everyone to try to become like a hyper realist and really train themselves to look at how the world works, stripped of our biases and our wishful thinking and our desire. I mean, it's similar to what Elon Musk says with first principles thinking. But when I was 20, I was 20 and I read this, it was like a slap in the face. Like, I guess I was just looking for values, um, like my own values that are going to sort of mold my growth into adulthood. And one thing he also wrote in Principles was he had this experience when believe he was in his 30s, and he was, this super successful, like, young investing prodigy, and had a lot of attention, and basically uh, very publicly asserted that he knew that some situation was going to play out in sort of the global macro um, economic world, and even went on TV and said, like, I know I'm right. Very sort of arrogant. And he thought this because he thought that his models, which had been correct up to the point in making predictions about how the world works, had been doing well. So he made this public proclamation, ended up being wrong, had to almost shut down Bridgewater, had to rebuild it from scratch. And he said what he gained out of that was sort of this core intellectual humility. And he started asking himself, like, it's not enough to think I'm right. I have to know why I am right and be able to, like, derive that and prove it from the most discrete, fundamental, logical sort of principles. So that's kind of what I was hinting at in that, like, bullet point that I put on the Google sheet. And I think that principle, and I know you have a lot to say about this topic too, so I'll shut up in a sec, but has been very much like a guiding principle for me of, like, being making sure that, like, I'm not overly confident about my convictions and my assumptions, and sort of where I need to, like, making sure that I can sort of prove why I think I'm right about something. So I'll shut up. Like, what do you think about all that?
Yeah. I mean, I think things are like incredibly complex, and without like really core tested principles or like domain expertise, like it's incredibly difficult to like really know something. Um, so yeah, I totally agree. Like people need to take a step back and be like, okay, do I really have an understanding of this? And like, yeah, do I have a good understanding of this? And like, can I take action upon this action, upon what I know?
And I think,
Fox?
I mean, there's that famous Feynman quote, right? Like, not the one that I have here, but the other one. What is it, like? The first principle is you must not fool yourself, and yourself is the easiest person to fool. And
Right.
I also mentioned Charlie Munger because he talks about in Poor Charlie's Almanac that he set it for himself as, like, a personal rule that he's never going to get into arguments unless he can state the opposition's argument better than his own. And he kind of calls that
Mm-hmm.
his rule of thumb of when do I deserve to have an opinion, right? Like,
Sure.
and for him, I don't deserve to have an opinion unless I can argue the opposition's point of view better than they can. And until
Sure.
then, I'm not going to, like, state what I think about a subject. I think that's like
Sure.
I think it's hard to do that, but I think it's a really good principle because, I mean, I definitely find myself falling into, like, talking about something that I actually don't really know that much about. And then, like, I have to catch myself, like, no, I actually don't really know that much about this. Like,
Sure. Yeah, I think that's like law firms, right? Like they'll take lawyers on their own team and be like, okay, like make the opposite, like be on the opposite side, like do the best case you can for the opposite side and use that as fuel to like build defense and arguments against it.
yeah.
Yeah. I, there's something that I read the other day that I like, I've actually started using, but I've also had like a meta thought about. And the tweet was just like, sometimes whenever I'm like struggling with something, I'll take a step back and ask myself, what would someone 10 times smarter than me do? And like, the guy was like, yeah, I find it to be like incredibly helpful. And I've like tried it and I was like, oh, wow, this is like an interesting like mental model to think about things. Yeah, and there's other ones like thinking in bets. Like if I had to actually make a bet on this, like how confident would I be? And like oftentimes people's confidence in their answer will be a lot lower. And like, yeah, I don't know what's your take on that? Because I feel like people like when asked a certain way or thought about problems in a certain way, like the answers are in our head, but we just like can't access them. And it's like goes against our, I feel like common knowledge is like, oh, you know something versus like, oh,
Mhm.
we know something. It's just like hidden in,
Yeah.
I don't know, a pattern of thinking, I guess.
Yeah, I think we as people have to oftentimes have to like rederive wisdom that has been told to us our whole lives, or like find our own path to it. Like, have you I'm sure you've had moments like where something that you've heard your whole life, like some wisdom like clicks for you, like, I mean, something that we have on
Whatever.
this
Yeah.
sheet. Yeah, whatever, right? So I think the benefit of these kinds of questions is like getting us to think differently, and the ones that stick are the ones that allow some sort of
Reframing.
like reframing, and then allows like it just something clicks in our head. So like your question,
Sure.
I mean, like your question about what would someone 10 times smarter than me do in this situation? Another one is like, what would I do 10 years in the future when I've already achieved this?
Work backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, work backwards. I think it's just teasing out, like getting to our thinking, first of all, like shaken up so we're not thinking about it in our default, like habitual way.
Sure. Yeah. I wonder what the like best, if there is, I think the real answer is like a combination, but like the best default way of thinking. I mean, I think like Ray's and Elon's of like, okay, like first principle thinking is like
Yeah.
tough to argue against, but I think having like a
Mhm.
collection of good mental models
I think another one that I
is good.
like that Naval talks about is he I think he tweeted, he said, when like paraphrasing, when I'm not sure how to approach the question, I always ask myself is, what is the correct very long-term solution to this problem? I think that's a really
Okay.
good question. Also love the like Peter Thiel question, like what would I do to achieve my 10-year goals in the next 6 months? That's
Right.
one of those like juggernaut questions that it's not that by asking it you're like gonna start trying to achieve that goal in the next 6 months, but it's trying to reevaluate like underlying assumptions and just challenge that default way of thinking. Like, why do you what is it about this that is going to make you like what's going to take so long? I
Sure.
think it's
Sure.
really important to collect those like foundational questions, and then
Good questions.
yeah, apply them when you're like dealing with, yeah, I mean, like if we apply it to this podcast, right? Like if the goal is to be like, let's say like one goal could be to get to the place where the podcast is popular enough where one, we're like forming relationships where people that we want to meet, two, we have an audience base that either through direct support or like ad revenue we make enough money to maybe not have to work 9 to 5 jobs, just as an example of what a goal could be. If I was to ask you, like, and we've talked about this, but I think it could be cool to talk about like what is the correct, like, very long term approach to doing that, how would you start to answer that question?
Practically, how would I answer that, or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
hypothetically? Like,
No, no, practically, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think like I think we'd have to prioritize like what one thing at a time, like growing an audience, improving content, like obviously doing multiple at once, but like what has the highest ROI, and then like drilling down on that and then going to the next one. And then like,
Hmm.
so I think like in our case, it's like, okay, like let's improve our quality and everything. And then like, okay, then we can focus on like growing it once we have like something worthy of like sharing. And that, obviously there's like a balance. You don't want to like go all in, make like 20 episodes and be like, okay, now we're going to show people like we've been doing
Hmm.
already. It's like showing, getting feedback and like iterating off that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think iteration in terms of content is great. So I think what we're doing makes a lot of sense. To supercharge it though, I don't know. What would you think, like, to add fuel to that
I
fire?
agree with that, and I think it's implied in what you said, but like consistency, like just making sure we continue to put out episodes, because like you don't, like that's required for iteration, right? Like we could be at episode 100, and that's going to be a way better place than we are now, but it's because we made it that far. So like I think
Sure.
what is the correct very long term solution to becoming like a successful podcast based on sort of those metrics that I said is like just keep doing it, keep getting better, based on feedback, and also like we become more comfortable. Our process is more refined. Maybe we, figure out a way to decide topics we're going to talk about in a better way. We start talking maybe more about current events. Maybe we, bring funnier aspects into the podcast.
Sure.
Bring certain guests. Like we're gonna have Garrett on at some point. Yeah, I think like the first thing is like just make sure we keep doing it.
Sure. Sure. I really like this. I know we spoke about this briefly, like about like niching down, like finding your niche and like marketing and being about that audience and like growing that following before like going to a larger or different audience. And like
Mm-hmm.
there's that book like Crossing the Chasm, and it's like it talks about that. Like you can't just go for this broad market. I mean, some people can,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, like start small and then eventually like you gain this adoption. And I've also seen another interesting thought by that guy. What was that book? The $100 million offer
Alex
guy.
like Hormozy or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And he like this. I thought was like really dope. This is a little bit of a tangent, but he was like, if you want to start charging more for your product, niche down. So like if you are selling like email marketing class, right? You can sell that for let's say $10 a month, right? But like if it's like email marketing for I don't know, software engineers or like hiring software engineers, right? That's probably worth like $100 a month. And then if it's like
Mm-hmm.
email marketing for ML engineers in big tech, like that could be, if someone's like at a startup trying to recruit like that type of talent, like that's probably worth thousands of dollars. So like
Mm-hmm.
this idea of niching, I thought was so interesting, and I think applies here as well. It's just like get niche, get small, and then scale up after that.
Do you think in the context of a podcast we have to be deliberate about that niche, or just be ourselves and let that sort of niche find us, or like how do you think about that?
I don't know. I think we're in the process
We're
of
figuring it out.
figuring
Yeah.
that out. Yeah, I'm trying to think what. Oh, I was going to say before too is the mental models. Like I feel like it'd be cool to just make like a small sheet. Like maybe we crank that out. Like or like an app where it's just like here are like great mental models, and like let's say you're going through a problem, like go through the sheet and like with someone
Mm-hmm.
10 times smarter, 6 months, like all these things. I feel like that could be helpful. I know
Yeah.
there's like some versions of that, but I think just like a 1 page or a 2 pager, just like
Yeah. Something really concise.
yeah.
I think that's a really good idea because I think
Or
we live
yo,
it. Talk to me.
one of those like Chrome, like when you open a new tab on Chrome and like it shows you like the weather for the day or the time, it could be like
Momentum.
this like mental, yeah, like something like that, but it's like mental model thing. I feel like that'd be cool, like easy to build, and like yo, I
Yeah,
think Momentum would have been like sold for something crazy just because
that
you
would be
have like
good.
you just gain a lot of traction. We should do that. We should that'd be cool, like build something and like talk about it. Like
I think that's a good idea. I think we could do that. We could use Garrett's photography.
yeah,
Yo,
yeah, and like I don't know. Well, I mean, once you have downloads, the rest is like
iteration.
adding fuel to the fire, like just
Yeah.
like yeah, what content's put on there and stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think it could be cool.
I think that could be really cool. I like the idea of keeping it short because I think there's so much content that talks about this exact same thing, which I don't think is a bad thing. But I found myself like getting like sort of podcast fatigue, where like if you go to Tim Ferriss or you go to like Shane Parrish or you go to like I don't know what's the inside
Spitting bars,
quest,
right?
the facts, the Tom Bilyeu, the like impact theory, that podcast, like you kind of see these guests like doing a podcast circuit. Well, they'll go to one
Tour,
podcast,
yeah,
like they'll do a podcast tour,
like
and
Huberman,
at
or
the end of that they're saying the same stuff. So like I think it's cool to keep. It would be cool to keep like to put something out that's really short. Just like here's a
mm,
collection of 5 to 10 questions, kind of like Tim did in Tools of Times, where he has that chapter like 17 questions that
yeah,
changed my life. I think that would be cool content to put out. Like asking these questions and maybe like a story, like a story. Maybe if we have a blog
sure,
about like how this applied to our life, just to build out like that content, but also
sure, sure,
to share things that we thought was helpful. Um, because I do think a way to differentiate, like not necessarily differentiate, but to strengthen the communication of a mental model is to attach it to a story. Because like that
Sure.
knowledge
That's the
project
most
book, that's like,
digestible.
yeah,
Yeah.
facts.
Um, yeah. Oh, and another one of our topics too is like about storytelling.
Yeah. So tell me
About
about this
that class.
class.
Yeah, yeah.
So you want to give a little
So
context?
some backstory. Yeah. So there's this monthly class, like it's almost like a master class type of thing. And Casey Neistat, famous YouTuber, makes a lot of videos, movie maker, whatever. He teaches his process of telling stories and also his process of like creating a film, whether that's like a YouTube video or like a full fledged movie. Um, and I think he had like 650 days. He like every day he made a vlog, and I mean they were getting like millions of views, so it was worth it. But that's like obviously a ton of work and a lot of stories. Um, but yeah, the class is super, super, super cool. There's people all over the world. Like someone's from Sweden, another person's from China, another person's from like another part of the country, and like everyone's just like posting their topics, and people comment, and like, and there's people from that are like 60, and there's people that are like like in their 20s. And the first assignment is like you need to go look for inspiration for a story, and you don't need. People always say like, I don't know, what's your favorite movie?
Arrival.
Arrival. Yeah, like Arrival, dope concept and dope execution, like sick movie. This is like take the most like mundane topic, and you can take like any topic and turn it into like a dope story. Um, so I went out and like went on like an hour walk like along this like trail and just take pictures of like cell phone tower, um, whatever, like a bird, I don't know, anything can be something like taking a picture of a garbage can, right? Like what was the design that went into there? Why did the like state decide to use this garbage can versus another? Why is it metal? Why does it have holes here? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can tell like a whole story about like everything or like the relationship of the garbage can to the like local environment. Like there's so many different paths of like something as, mundane as like a garbage can. So it just like opened the world of things and like, yeah, it was sweet. One thing too, last part of this is just that while I was walking, there's like this river, and I'm walking, and I'm like trying to look for ideas, and I see this like patched up kind of like arc, like arch, and like I'm like, what is this? And it's like underneath this like building. So I like, take a picture of it, and then I walk over, and I see like the like building manager, security guard, whatever there, and I like end up talking to him. I was like, what is the deal with this? And he's like, I don't know. And then we like are chatting for like 5 minutes, and it turns out like this building used to be like a police headquarters. Then it was like a sawmill or something like that. And then like now it's like residential, and it's like this mundane building that I've walked past like 8,000 times and just like
Mm-hmm.
unpack this whole story from it. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's like approaching the world from like a child's point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember after we had that day in Santa Cruz, we were talking about it, and I think that, and I this point was reinforced when I did the meditation retreat in 2018. Just a little context: I did in 2018 a 10-day silent vipassana retreat, and came out of that with a very strong conviction that one's ability to pay attention. I feel this is true for my life. I am much more fulfilled and happier when my attention span is strong and like I'm able to pay attention for something for a really long time.
Sure.
And the reason I think this is because I don't know, in Doors of Perception, Aldous Huxley was trying to describe what is it about like a trip. I think he's talking about mescaline in that one, but I think it applies to shrooms and acid probably as well. What is it about a trip that feels so meaningful? And his sort of hypothesis or description was that like these substances expand your ability to pay attention and your sensitivity
Sure.
like massively to the present moment. So you could look at the way light is reflecting off, a surface and stare at that for 4 hours because it just seems so meaningful. And did you ever read that book?
But it is though. Like
It is,
that's the
yeah.
thing. Like it like I feel like we are like numb to how interesting reality is because we're like
Hmm.
we build these mental models like, oh, this is rock. This is like a rock. Okay, it's not that
Hmm.
interesting. But when you look at the rock, you're like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
there's so many interesting things. But yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. And did you ever read that book? It was, I think Tim Ferriss had this like British Zen master on his podcast maybe a year ago. I think I told you that I was reading that book. I think it's called a single a single blade of grass. Did you read this?
no, but
So it's just this
I
guy
could
who's like,
imagine what.
yeah, it was a memoir of this guy who was an author, and it kind of tells his life story through the perspective of, on the one hand, being an author, and on the other hand, being pursuing Zen Buddhism like very, very as seriously as anyone can. Like, and he says the same thing, that when you are advanced in your meditation training, the sort of experience of life the stops progressively running through the filter of thinking, and you stop experience like interpreting your experience through thoughts and what is the meaning of this and these kinds of like
Sure.
questions. And it's really like training your nervous system and attention span to be sensitive enough so that you are deriving your sense of meaning from how immersed you are in your experience of life, instead of thinking about it and asking yourself like, what is meaningful, what is this, what is that, you know?
Right. Like
And I think,
turning the amygdala off and just like consuming
mhm,
the yeah, like what's going on around
mhm.
you.
And I remember when I went to see the Chili Peppers live, Flea, they did tell little jokes and just talk to the audience in between songs and stuff, and Flea said the most important thing, the answer to everything is to be present. It's also the hardest thing for a
Sure.
human being to do. And I think
What
my,
Papa said too.
yeah.
Like yeah, I 100% agree. But I think yeah, everything is so meaningful, and like
Hmm.
when you live through this,
Yeah.
lens. I found like on the retreat that something that was like I don't know, sounds like a high thought was like really interesting to experience, not high, and like just like at a deeper level, like understand like all of life is just firing neurons or like just senses from the outside like coming in.
Hmm.
Um, and when you like think about that, it's like I don't know, it was just like very impactful and like I don't know, deepened my understanding of my like experiences. Yeah,
Maybe we should dive deeper into that in a future episode, because I think there's a lot to unpack from those retreats.
sure,
But I remember at the end of my first one, and I've only been on two so far, but at the end of the first one, like on day 10, you mingle and you meet people. And there was a guy there who
day is
was,
hilarious.
huh?
That day is
Oh,
hilarious when you find
yeah.
like hear people's voices, who they are,
Yeah.
and you like have this whole narrative of someone. You're
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah. I mean, like that was a big learning too, right? Like I had all these convictions about like, oh, this person is X, like has some quality, or like this person like is definitely whatever. Like you find that even when you're aware of it, you start believing stories about individuals. Like, oh, that's the
Yeah, yeah,
person that
and like
always
completely
coughs,
wrong.
and they're completely wrong. Dude, how valuable is
That
just
was
getting that?
hilarious, bro.
Yeah,
That
how
was
valuable.
on like everyone was shook. Everyone too
Yeah,
was just
everyone's
like,
shook.
yo, what the like?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember this
yeah,
story
that
I'm
was
about to tell. Like, there was a guy
yeah,
there who was um, a former the former president of the American Psychiatric Association, right? And I thought this guy was like a clown. Like I was like, this guy's like he's so annoying. Like he always coughs. Like there's no way this guy should be here. Like all these fucking stories in my head, and I start talking to
yeah,
him,
yeah,
and like I talked to this guy for like 4 hours. He's so intelligent.
yeah,
Like, anyway, and I started asking him like, how does this retreat sort of play into like what do you think about this given your background? And he says honestly, like
sure,
if more people did this, I'd be out of a job. Like
sure,
meaning the tremendous psychological like mental health benefit of going to these retreats. There was another guy who I've told you this before, but there was a guy there who like 10 years, 15 years prior to the retreat, had gotten to like a really, really bad skiing accident, had broken tons of
Mhm.
shit in his
Oh yeah, you
body,
told me
and
this. Yeah.
for a decade was trying to heal himself, like was going to the top doctors, physical therapists, all these acupuncture, like anything he could do, because his like body alignment, I guess, was messed up, and he had like he couldn't walk and like I saw him on the first day and he was
You
like
need that
limping.
floor mat though.
Facts. Yeah, he was limping and shit at the beginning of the retreat, and then afterwards, like he was walking properly, and I was like, "What?" Um, and he's like, "Yeah, like with the technique of the meditation that is taught, the meditation technique that's taught, I was able to sort of focus my attention on all the parts of my body that were broken
Right.
or not proper, and they just healed."
It
Which is
sounds like
not.
bullshit though, but
It sounds
like
like bullshit. It's
it's
completely a
yeah,
fact.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's wow. I
so
wonder if we like if there was a way to hit him up, be like, "Yo, how you feeling?" Like, I wonder if it's still
it'd be
if he's
hard,
chilling or
yeah.
like what's. I know, but that
Um,
would be fascinating. I'm sure. I mean, clearly his story is there. It's just like tracking him down.
yeah, and I think the thing there is, I mean, and Wim Hof stuff kind of gets into this too. The human mind is trainable to such an extent that we can sort of influence what happens in our body just through conscious attention. And my hypothesis is that we're actually able to influence our blood flow. Um, and I don't have evidence for this, but I think it's true. Actually, I do think Wim Hof has evidence for this because he's able to sort of show that with his mind he can, modulate his body temperature at, he can even localize it to like I'm going to raise the temperature of my left hand, and like when they study
Mm,
that, it is that he's increasing blood flow, and the Vipassana technique definitely convinced me that that is the case because like where the technique basically takes you, I mean, this like trains your attention to such a strong sort of such a high level where you're able to focus on different parts of your body and like
sure, sure. I mean, I
complete.
wonder where the neuron like what neurons you're impacting, if it's like at the brain level or like the localized neurons at like the, let's say, hand example, like in your hand, or is it in your brain? I mean,
I
I
don't know.
assume it's in the command center, but yeah, I mean, I would 100% believe, like, think that's possible.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this a bit the other night too. Like, I don't think how to say this. There are techniques and solutions and sort of exercises out in the world that are maybe not traditional or like mainstream.
Modern,
Yeah,
yeah,
they're not modern. Like if you have an illness, I mean, it's one thing to be like you're going to heal it with acupuncture. Okay, maybe not, but there are actually things out there that are starting to get scientific backing, like the just tremendous benefits of cold water immersion. Like
sure, sure.
there's this story. This one company that makes ice baths, like one of the founders has a story that she had a very debilitating like autoimmune disorder, Hashimoto's disease, and her case was like so severe that she like had to quit her job because she couldn't go in the office because the
Mhm.
fragrances from people's like colognes and perfumes would trigger like crazy reactions in her body where she would get
Mm.
like uncontrollable bouts of
Hives and
itching,
stuff.
sneezing, hives,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And she had done, all the things that doctors had said, like getting on
Sauna,
all these
ointment,
different.
all this shit.
Exactly. And it wasn't until she started doing cold water immersion that like her symptoms completely went away and they never came back as long as she was continuing to do this. And it's like, how do we continue to like carry the torch of like this is something that people who are dealing with messed up shit like in their lives, whether it's like mental health issues or even physical health issues, should consider
Sure,
as in like as a complementary sort of approach to whatever they're already doing.
sure, sure. I mean, I think it come right. Like most people, if you ask them to take like a cold shower, would be like absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is like age old, like no pain, no gain. Like
Hmm.
there's, I don't know, like freaking your body out to the point where it like can potentially die, like, and it goes into like fight or flight mode and launches like, you know, all out defense. Like, I mean, it checks out that would, you know, lead to positive effects. I mean, maybe negative effects. Who knows? Like, who knows what? I don't know how long women's been doing it, but I wonder, like, 60 years of doing ice plunges, if it could have a negative impact. My intuition says no, but like, who knows? But I think, yeah, I don't know. I imagine the long term impacts are much net extremely positive.
Oh, they are. I mean, just doing it for the month of December when I was doing it back in New York, like every day, twice a day, cold plunge, 33-degree water. It easily is the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. Like my energy levels were through the roof. My focus was through
Facts.
the roof. My sleep was amazing. My workouts were the best they've ever been. Appetite, great. Like
You
everything
always
was
had a
just
cold.
functioning.
You always had a cold drink at night too. Just
Facts.
throw it in the cold. Yeah, it's a fact. Yeah, I still got to try your
The
ice chest.
setup.
Is it being kept cold, or you left it
No,
like drained,
it's
or what?
empty.
Which
Yeah, I
thing?
drained it. I drained it.
Facts.
It sucks.
Uh,
Electricity. Yo, was your electricity bill like brolic this month?
did I send it to you, bro?
You might have,
I
because
have
in
like,
my other group chat, like we're talking about, like, yo, electricity bills are brolic in New York right now.
bro, you've seen like
Yeah,
my apartment is like on the very like for New York, like average size or like whatever. It's not very big
yeah.
and like a few hundred square feet, right? And like 300-400 square feet. And yes, it was like a freezing month. I ran it more than usual, but like it was almost $400, and like
Yeah,
normal bill is like 70 to like $100, even
yeah,
with like AC or other heat. Like,
yeah. My
yeah,
friends, in my one of my group chats, were complaining about that. Like, my friend Joe was like, "Yo, was everyone's like Con Ed bill this month just
yeah.
brolic?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was
Who's
crazy."
pay, bro? Who can afford like people if you know you don't have much money to spare, like you can't afford like an extra few $100. Like we have a house, bro. That's easily like a few $1,000. Like
Yeah,
who
it's
knows?
wild. No, that's why
It's
my parents
crazy.
were telling me too. Like their electricity bill was crazy.
Yeah,
It's like $700, $600. Like,
yeah.
yeah, we have a pretty big apartment, right? Like my parents' apartment is pretty big, but it's not huge. I mean, I don't know,
My
like
bill's half that, more than half that, and it
yeah,
was like a fraction of the size.
yeah,
It's
yeah. I
wild.
mean, it's wild. Inflation, bro.
It's
I
uh,
think the next
a
couple
bunch of
years
things.
are going to be wild. Like
Yeah,
shit's popping
there
off.
is
I mean,
very yeah. I think long term, chilling, but like the next few years, there's
mhm.
just so many things in flux, and like yeah, I don't know, but keep chilling. So, should we do some last minute questions and then we'll
Yeah.
wrap things up?
What have you read, consumed, experienced in the last week that sort of is top of mind and you could talk about and share?
I think the biggest thing that I've consumed that I've really liked has been uh, that book, the Chris Voss book, Don't Split the Difference.
I actually
He's
don't know
like
this
this.
book. I've seen the title, but I don't
You
know the
should
book.
it like 100% incredible high ROI on the time. TLDR, he is like a FBI like hostage negotiator, and he
Oh
teaches you
yeah.
how to like negotiate and communicate, and like it's just fascinating. Like, and I would like love to like talk with him or like do a negotiation with him because it would just be like a bloodbath. Like he is just like on
So
another
elite.
level. Yeah, and like his tactics and stuff. And I'm sure this is just like the light version of like what he actually uses, but um, highly recommend just for knowledge, let alone like practically. So
Is there like a
yeah.
certain idea that comes to mind when you think about the book that's like actionable?
Um, one of the ones is just like mirroring. Like if you want to understand someone, if you want someone to feel more understood and like more open to like reception, like just echoing or mirroring like what they're saying to you. Um, and yeah, it's just really interesting. And
Mhm.
obviously he's applying it in like the most intense cases ever. But yeah, So
Dope.
that would
I'll
be,
definitely.
yeah. I'll stick with that one. I'm curious what about what you've been consuming that you like.
So I've been like interviewing for jobs recently, so haven't been reading much outside of sort of materials relevant to the job search. So I've been reading the sort of designing data intensive applications book. It's been pretty interesting, but my girlfriend and I watched this show, I think HBO Max, called The Head, and it's um, like a 6 episode, what a micro series or whatever. Like I don't know what the word is, but it's basically about these researchers in Antarctica who spend 6 months on a base during the 6 months like when there's no sunlight,
Mm.
and
They just like fall to
basically,
pieces.
yeah, it's like a mystery ensues and like
Is it
someone,
fiction or?
it's fiction, completely fiction, and like someone gets murdered and
Mm.
there's like this huge mystery and no one really can sort of, it's just the telling of that story of like what went wrong, and sort of every episode we were like on the edge of our seats, and like it was, the acting was horrendous, the script was horrendous, but the story itself was very captivating, and
Yeah.
um I would recommend watching that show if someone wants to find something cool to watch. Otherwise,
Okay.
haven't read anything cool recently. Have been in the mood for like some, oh, my girlfriend and I also watched this South Korean movie. The same director who did Parasite, one of his earlier movies is called Memory of Murder, and it's kind of like Zodiac level sort of murder mystery. It was really cool. It was a good
Mm.
movie. Highly recommend it.
I've seen one of his other movies, though I did fall asleep during it, but it's supposed to be very good. Yeah. Also, that reminded me, there was something else I watched that I really like. I watched the Carl Icahn documentary.
Was it good?
Um, it was like, I mean, I think it's pretty biased, but it was like, I felt very like, it's very, definitely very motivational in a certain sense.
What's it
And
called?
I mean, the guy is like clearly like exceptionally intelligent, like came from like broke part in Queens and like ended up getting like top of his class in like the whole like city or something, and then like went to Princeton and then had like the best thesis, which is like being the valedictorian. And then like, I mean, he's just clearly like his IQ is through the roof, but like, um, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was worth the time in my opinion.
Where is it on? What streaming?
HBO Max.
Cool. That
HBO
sounds like
Max
something. HBO Max is elite.
is like punching above its class. Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
like holding its own.
I feel like Netflix is kind of trash now. I feel like Netflix. I won't say that, but do you remember when Netflix like wasn't? I feel like it's like 90% like original content now. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it used
I
to
mean,
be like
there are
you
all
could
these
find any movies.
contracts cut.
Yeah,
There's been all these contracts that are cut, right? Because everyone has their own streaming service, and like in their like, it makes sense for them to produce content that they like own. They don't have to pay like royalties on it in the future. Like, but I agree. I they definitely have some like obviously like hit shows, but I definitely agree. It's like not that consistent. But
Disney Plus is also fire. Disney Plus's content
yeah,
is elite.
I feel like Disney Plus, HBO, and Netflix is like the trifecta at the moment.
Hulu's whack though. Hulu make you like
Yeah,
watch commercials. Like fuck out of here.
literally. You
Trash
almost the
commercials.
shit's so bad. You almost rather watch the commercial than
Dead ass.
literally.
It's getting me tight. All right, let's call it
Uh,
episode 2. Blubhaus. Do we have a name? We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Figure it out.
TBD.
All right.
Good chatting.
Yeah. Peace.
Peace.